Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's HDI webinar. In case you missed it in 2017, The Velocity of Change. Today's webinar is brought to you by HDI Conference and Expo, taking place in lovely Las Vegas, Nevada, April 10th through 13th, 2018. We'll do a little bit of housekeeping first off, and then we'll get started with the material. Remember that you can stay in touch with HDI on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Google+, and of course on our members-only site, HDI Connect at connect.thinkhdI.com. My name is Roy Atkinson. I'm the Senior Writer Analyst at HDI, and I'll be both your host and speaker today. I'm glad to have you with us. If you're experiencing any technical problems, please refresh your browser. That cures almost every issue that you might have, including audio. You can participate in the Q&A session by asking questions at any time during the webcast, and they'll be answered toward the end of the webcast. And I have a couple of polls for you today, so I'll be asking you some questions as well, and we'll share the feedback. The slide will advance automatically for you throughout the event, and remember to make sure that your speakers are unmuted. And if you didn't hear that, your speakers might be muted. Starting off with a quote that one of the speakers used at our Fusion conference in October, change has never happened this fast before and will never be this slow again. Very interesting concept. That quote comes from Graham Wood, who's a thinker on social media, and it caught my attention immediately. Change is very rapid these days, and also change is so widespread. It seems like everything is changing. So I have a question for you about that. So we're going to start with a poll, and this question is, did your organization go through any major changes in 2017? Did you have new technology? Did you revamp your processes and procedures? Or maybe some other things? Or no, nothing major, no big changes at all. I'll give you a few minutes to respond to that poll. Interesting so far as the results come in. Very interesting. Okay, so here's what I'm seeing. About a third of you say that you got new technology in 2017. About half of you got new processes and procedures, a little more than half. And only about 18% of you said that you had no major changes. And that's what we're about today. The technology is advancing. People are changing the way they do things, the processes and procedures, and maybe their staffing models, a lot of other changes going on. And I'm going to review some of those things with you today so that you can at least be aware that you're not alone, that everybody's experiencing these rapid changes, and maybe to prepare for the future, because if it didn't happen in 2017, maybe it's going to happen in 2018. Maybe that new technology is going to roll out this year. So let's raise awareness and say what's going on. First of all, why is this going on? What's happening so fast that we need to make these changes as rapidly as possible? I know there's been a great uptick in DevOps this past year, and that's all about speed and continuous deployment. And one of the main drivers for this is that businesses are just saying, must go faster, like Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park in the Jeep trying to outrun the T-Rex. Must go faster, it says business, and IT is trying to do this as rapidly as possible, trying to streamline procedures, trying to get lean, adopting some practices from places like DevOps, and making sure that they're doing things as rapidly as possible, at the same time paying attention to things like risk. So traditionally, support was reactive. The old way was set out an SLA, say that we're going to resolve this within X amount of time, or we're going to answer the phone within X amount of time, X percentage of time, and then customers would have something happen. They'd contact the support center, and support would respond to that plea for help. That is just not good enough anymore. What needs to happen now is that you need to get a lot more proactive. We're going to talk about some of the ways that that can happen as we go along. SLAs may be becoming a thing of the past. The new way of doing things is more of collaborating and advising. So a lot of business intelligence and business relationship management is going into support now. Even in realms like desktop support, the desktop support technician is becoming a valuable liaison between business units and IT, gathering information, bringing it back, and providing advice on what technologies may help the business units get ahead faster and farther. And here's one illustration. In 2016, about 28% of the respondents to our annual survey said that they were using intelligent swarming as opposed to like tiered support, right? And this past year, 2017, that went up to 34%. That's a substantial increase. And intelligent swarming is, of course, getting the people with the proper skills around the problem, not necessarily having it handled at level 1 to the point where level 1 runs out of information or capability and passing it up to level 2, level 3, and so on, but getting people with all the skills necessary to resolve the issue around the issue right off the bat. So much more of a collaborative way of solving things. There are some organizations that set up what they call star teams, where they'll have everybody from an account representative to a server administrator to a frontline support specialist to perhaps somebody who's fluent in Unix or Linux or Windows Server, and that team can work together to resolve just about any issue that comes up without escalating anything outside the team. So that kind of approach is becoming more popular, as we can see from the results that we got on our annual survey. Just one-way collaboration is becoming much more to the front. And it's not just technology or even support approaches that are changing. A lot of the frameworks that IT has used for years are maybe changing, maybe being replaced, maybe being updated, and we'll talk about some of that. On the left side of your screen there is the list of frameworks that are the most used by our respondents to our annual survey. And that's out of hundreds of organizations. These are the ones that they say they use. ITIL is number 1. That's used by more than half of organizations. The HDI Support Center Standard, KCS, that's Knowledge Centered Service, used to be called Knowledge Centered Support. Microsoft Operations Framework, ISO and ISO IEC standards, capability maturity models, Lean, Total Quality Management, Six Sigma, Kaizen, COBIT, and the Process Maturity Framework. Those are the ones that we see most often among the people that respond to our annual surveys. On the right side of the screen are some newer frameworks and methodologies that are being much more talked about, especially over the past year, and much more influential in the way that we're doing things in IT in general, and certainly within service and support, including Agile and Scrum and DevOps, Kanban. And then we're going to talk about some of these newer frameworks, Verism, SIAM, which you may or may not be familiar with. These are popular in different parts of the world, perhaps, from us. Verism is quite new. We'll talk about that. And then some competency measurements and systems that are becoming popular in other parts of the world as well, just to make you aware of them and make your organization aware of them so that you can see if they might be helpful to you to be able to organize better and face the kinds of changes that you're going to be experiencing over the next couple of years. Because this isn't stopping. As we said at the beginning, this is as slow as it's going to be, and it's pretty rapid. So hang on to your hats. Let's look at these new contenders in the world of frameworks. And there's Verism and SIAM, and then we'll look at some of the competency methods. So Verism, which is brand new, it was introduced as a draft document in November. So this is really just out. The first exams just became available. It is absolutely new. It is not being touted as a new framework. The folks who have worked on it say that it's not a replacement for anything, but it is a way to help organizations better use and understand the frameworks that they might already be using. Because a lot of organizations use multiple frameworks and methodologies. I'm going to go back here to a previous slide here for a second, just so I can talk about some of the ways that an organization might use multiple methodologies or frameworks. Actually, HDI did a booklet showing the synergies between ITIL and KCS a few years ago, and those still exist. ITIL is very much in line with KCS. There's no clash between the two. You can use both. The HDI Support Center standard works very nicely with ITIL and, of course, with KCS, which is a methodology that we strongly support. Lots of these things go together. COBIT for certain aspects of auditing, compliance, security measures. You might want to be involved with COBIT and as well as ITIL. So there's not, you don't have to just use one thing. You can use many. The problem is that when organizations start using many methodologies or frameworks, there can be some confusion about what's the right thing to do or which one takes precedence over what and where within our processes and procedures do we define that. And that's the idea of Verism, to create what they're calling a mesh so that you can navigate through the frameworks that you're already using or that you might want to adopt over time. And they're calling this, they're not calling it a framework, as I said, they're calling it an approach. So if you want to learn more about Verism, verism.global, there's the URL is at the bottom of the slide there, and you can, by the way, download the slides from the Attachments tab on your BrightTalk screen, and you can have those slides afterwards to look at, go through. Now let's move ahead now to SIAM, Service Integration and Management. This is one that is extremely popular in Great Britain and in Europe and becoming more so here. It is not so much an organizationally presented framework or methodology. It is something that has evolved over time because organizations are so much using many vendors now and many methods of service delivery. So you have, and you can see on that slide at the bottom, you can see platform as a service, software as a service, infrastructure as a service, all of these different services that are available to organizations now, whether they're coming from inside or from outside vendors. Well, how do you make sure that all of those things are working together? And who is responsible to make sure that that's happening? Who's in charge of the delivery of the cloud services that you're buying, and how does that integrate with your internal sourced IT infrastructure and the services that are coming from inside? Well, that's the work of the service integration and management methodologies. It basically puts a layer of management in to integrate those services with each other, make sure that you're getting the most out of all of the services, and try to prevent clashes and turf wars and a lot of the other things that can go on when you're trying to use multiple vendors, multiple sources, etc. So just be aware that CIAM is something that's out there. It is gaining in popularity and might be useful for your organization. Now, as far as individuals are concerned, of course, one of the things that's going to change as time goes on is the level of competency and the types of competencies that each individual is responsible for. And I will just impress upon you, as has been said in many places for many times, is that you are responsible for your career, for your personal development and professional development. Your organization may offer you the opportunity to take advantage of some professional development, but ultimately you're the one that's responsible for it. So make sure that you take a look at what's out there for you. The main reason that I want to present this one is just to show you the different areas that are considered part of the competencies of IT service management now, or service management in general, if you're using enterprise service management in your organization, right? So starting at the top, your organization and marketplace. So what does your organization do? What business are you in? And how do you as a professional function within that organization? So business awareness and awareness of the types of businesses that are around you, that's really important. Next step is IT and technical knowledge. We all have to have at least some of that, almost regardless of where we are within the organization. As Matt Hooper says, IT is not a department anymore, it's a competency, and certainly those of us who are working within IT departments need to have a good range of technical knowledge. Core IT service management practice awareness and understanding of what the frameworks mean, what the processes mean. So if you've taken an ITIL foundation course, perhaps, you know about the various ITIL processes. You've at least had an overview of those, and you understand how those things work within your organization if you've adopted those particular processes and adapted them to your organization. Interpersonal and relationship skills, big time. This is a very important cog in the wheel of efficiency for sure, and also plays a large role, as we have discovered at HDI through our surveys. The relationship skills are way, way, way important. For example, we know that the most important factor in employee satisfaction is relationships within the team, and has been for several years of polling. So that is a really important facet of your professional tool set, is having those interpersonal and relationship skills. Self-management and leadership skills, of course, goes without saying, especially if you want to move up the chain, if that's your wish. You want to get into leadership roles, you need to develop those skills and be aware of the terminology and the skills that are expected of you. And then general business and management skills. So outside of IT, what is business? What language is business using? And as we've seen over the past several years, that's a very, very important part of how IT is becoming more influential in business. It's by understanding business processes and understanding business goals and business language, being able to communicate in ways that maybe we haven't been so good at in the past. And one of the major rifts between the business organization and the IT department or organization has been that we don't speak the same language. IT tends to speak in technical terms, business tends to speak in terms like financial and efficiency terms, and maybe from time to time the two don't understand each other very well. And so that part of professional development is really important. So just to be aware of this professional service management framework. And there's another one out here, and this is gaining a lot of popularity. It's called SFIA, S-F-I-A, the Skills Framework for the Information Age. And the horizontal bars at the top there are usually displayed vertically, but they're easier to read this way. Usually the numbers are at the bottom and the words go up vertically, but it makes it a little bit easier to read if I put it this way. So I flipped it around. And you can see that you can move through a skill set from being able to follow to being able to set strategy. So there's a series of hierarchical steps that are involved in the skills. And basically, SFIA operates as a database of skill sets, and you could do things like build job descriptions using the SFIA skill sets. So drop a set of skills together and build a job description from that particular set of skills. Might be a little different from what your job descriptions look like now. Or you're looking for somebody with a particular set of skills. There's actually, if they're participating in SFIA, you can actually search and look for individuals that have particular skills that they've listed. And they're in a bunch of categories there. You can see, I'm not going to go through them each individually, but you can see the various areas there that the skills are organized by. So that's a very interesting way to look at the organization of skills and being able to do things like find the right people and develop job descriptions that might be more advanced or individualized to your organization. Even though generally in the market you might need a particular set of skills to fulfill a particular job, this allows you to build customized skill sets for your particular organization. That's kind of neat. This is a big one for you. ITIL is being updated. If you haven't heard that, Axelos announced this at our last conference, and this is being worked on. It's a global effort. It's going to be a lot of community involvement in updating ITIL. Nobody is quite sure what the updated product is going to look like at this point, whether it's going to be a complete set of books or it's going to be individualized facets of the framework. We're not really sure at this point, but if you want to know more about it or if you want to register to participate and give feedback on the ITIL updates, you can go to the URL there, and you will find material and information on the update itself. It's ongoing and it's going to be around for a while. So while we're talking about ITIL in particular, I'm going to launch another survey here, and I'm going to start the vote. And does your organization primarily rely on ITIL guidance? If that's your primary source of guidance on service management, yes. No, you use other frameworks more than ITIL, or we don't rely very much on external guidance. Maybe you can just give a vote there. We'll take a look at what your responses are. And let's keep those polls going. That's pretty interesting. All right, we're going to keep that open for another few seconds. And we have a very interesting response, which I'm not totally surprised at, but here we go. All right, we're going to count down for about another 10 seconds to give anybody else a chance to respond. There we go. We got some changes going on here. All right, 3, 2, 1, and I'm going to stop the voting. And here's what we got. 72% of you, or I'm sorry, 70% of you said that you rely primarily on ITIL guidance. Your organization does, anyway. About 10% of you said you use other frameworks more than ITIL. And about 20% of you said you don't rely very much on external guidance. So that ITIL guidance number of 70% of you relying on ITIL guidance primarily is very much in the ballpark with research that we've done. As I mentioned in our annual survey, ITIL is the number one, and it's about a little over half, about 55% of organizations there said that that's their primary framework. And then in some other research we did in 2017, we found also that in some areas, about 70% of organizations use ITIL. So this is roughly in the ballpark of what we would expect to see. So it's important, since a large percentage of you are using ITIL as your primary framework for guidance, this update is going to impact you in one way or another. And as I said, because it's developing now, nobody's really sure how deep those impacts are going to be, what they're going to look like. But just be aware that this is coming, and we'll see how it develops over time. And you might want to stay in touch with those updates. We'll be providing information, of course. Since we do ITIL training, we will absolutely be watching what's going on and adjusting accordingly. All right, moving on. This is just a reminder that, again, going back to that list of frameworks and methodologies, according to our annual survey, the second most popular one in that particular group of respondents is the HDI Support Center Standard. And this is just a very, very basic, quick look at how that's structured. And so you can see there's the enablers on the right and the results on enablers on the left and results on the right. Do I know my right from my left? Usually, but not today. And you can, if you're an HDI member, you can download the HDI Support Center Standard from our website. If you're not an HDI member, be aware that it's there, and it might be an impetus for you to join HDI. As I said, this is thoroughly compatible with ITIL, so it doesn't prevent you, I don't forget what the word is that I'm looking for. It doesn't prevent you from using ITIL for guidance and the HDI Support Center Standard. That we've also done some work with Axelos on that. There's a booklet available from them by our faculty member Paul Dooley, who wrote about the synergies between ITIL and HDI Support Center Standard and how they work together, and it's called Better Together. If you just search on HDI on the Axelos website, you can find that particular publication. All right, moving on. So more change. If there was one phrase that was used very, very, very heavily this year, it was artificial intelligence. AI has been all over the place this year, especially in our industry. A lot of folks being a little bit afraid of what's going to happen with AI taking over the support center and putting people out of work and so forth, and we'll discuss that in a second. That was a big, big, big topic, probably the #1 topic of 2017, artificial intelligence. Natural language processing, being able to speak to computers and have them speak back to you, and have them in one way or another understand you at least some of the time when you're not screaming representative at them to make yourself understood. Predictive analytics, that has started to play more of a role in what we do. Automation under the hood that allows systems to see what might happen, what's going to happen, and make some predictions about what to do to prevent it from happening. Service automation, for sure, all kinds of service automation, from things like password reset to onboarding to lots of different multifaceted processes and procedures that can be automated. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And then bots and virtual agents. So these are really customer-facing pieces of automation. Chatbots are becoming much more popular. You run into them all the time when you're on a website, and you get an instantaneous response from a chat, a support chat. Chances are it's a bot. Virtual agents that can respond to common questions, and we're going to talk a little bit about the value of that going forward. But all of these things have been included in the technology changes that have been rolling out during the past year and becoming increasingly important. And even though your organization might not be investing in artificial intelligence by name or predictive analytics by name, They may be buying software that has those components already built in, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So the big fear, of course, is that we're all going to be out of work. And so far, we're not seeing that. This is from 2017 research that we did. And here's how automation has affected headcount. So we asked organizations, hey, are you using different types of automation? And then the organizations that said, yes, we are, we asked a little bit about how IT headcount has been affected. And as you can see from the pie chart there, it's increased in a larger percentage of organizations than it has decreased. So the blue section of the pie chart there, for those of you who are not colorblind, you can see that it's just about 12% of organizations say they actually have increased their IT headcount in spite of the fact that they've introduced automation, whereas a little over 8% say they have decreased headcount, and in about a third, a little more than a third, 34.8%, 34.9%, say they haven't changed their headcount at all, and about 45% said that, well, the headcount's been reassigned to other tasks. And therein lies the opportunity for us, especially in support. What we've been griping about for a long time is that we spend so much of our time firefighting, keeping the lights on, doing that repetitive work, that support work, fixing things when they break, and trying to keep up with the day-to-day volume of work that we have, which seems to increase every year. In fact, we have evidence that it does increase every year. If we can automate a lot of that repetitive, simple work, like password reset, that's one example that's been spreading over the years. If you take that off the plate of your support centers, especially the first level, that frees up your level 1 folks to do more advanced work, more complex work. And this is a double-edged sword, however, because when you do that, it means that the work that level 1 is dealing with is primarily complex work and not simple work anymore. And I'm going to talk about that just for a minute, a little bit, a couple of slides down the road here too. So far at least, we're not seeing job replacement by robots, which is one of the big fears, I think, as time goes on and as this technology becomes available. This I found fascinating. It's a little bit of an eye chart, but just know that down the left side, about the left half of this slide, are all the results for the different technologies we asked businesses if they're investing in over the next year. And we asked that in 2017, so 2017, 2018. And those are just the raw numbers. And then what I did was I looked through those and I said, okay, well, what are the top 5 things that they're investing in, and what are the bottom 5, the smallest percentages? And very interestingly, the bottom 5, cognitive systems, machine learning, artificial intelligence, chatbots, and virtual agents. Those are all those hot button topics that everybody's been talking about all year. Why are they at the bottom? Why are such a small percentage of organizations investing in those technologies? Well, I think one of the primary reasons is that A, it's really new. B, it again, going back to what I said earlier, it's not so much that they might invest in those technologies directly. Like, I don't think there's too many people that are going out and saying, we're going to buy some artificial intelligence and install it in our organization. Well, I'm not sure what that would look like. However, they are buying systems that have some artificial intelligence components built in. For example, there are several examples on the market today where artificial intelligence is built into IT service management systems. Many of the producers, the vendors who sell IT service management software, have included things like artificial intelligence into the software in the new versions, or will be introducing it in their next version, and that's where the uptake is going to be in the organizations. It's not going to be going out and buying it directly. It's going to be, these things are going to be components of the technologies that we're going to be buying over the next few years. Now, on the other hand, the top 5 there, and these all make really good sense if you think about it. Cloud applications, of course, everybody's getting as much into the cloud as possible, pending compliance issues and pending, your organization's buy-in to cloud services. Service automation, which I mentioned earlier. Homegrown applications, very interesting that organizations are investing in homegrown applications. We're going to solve our own problem. We're going to do it by developing our own software in-house to do it. And then 2 that also make sense and are especially important to us in service and support, which is customer experience and customer feedback technologies. So making it easier for people to give us feedback and for us to receive and analyze that feedback. And collaboration and social tools. So being able to collaborate with your team or teams that are scattered over the world. As we know from our survey materials, many organizations have multiple support centers that might be in a follow-the-sun arrangement. So maybe they're in the Philippines, India, Vietnam, Costa Rica, different parts of the United States, different time zones, et cetera, throughout the world. Having the capability to collaborate and work with those folks and carry on conversations in a social way so that we can follow particular threads, get updates from particular people, use those conversations to get down the road in terms of providing solutions. That's really important. So those make really good sense from my perspective for the future of support. So we haven't reached the tipping point yet, but we have time now while these things are being developed and while they're being introduced to organizations to consider how best to use them. So what's the boy, this is a cliche, but I'm going to use it. What's the low-hanging fruit? Because that's an analogy that you'll understand. Everybody talks about the low-hanging fruit. What's the low-hanging fruit for support in terms of using some of this automation in one way or another to provide solutions quickly for customers to do things better and to take some of that really low kind of knucklehead work off the plates of your level 1 folks, the really repetitive stuff, the questions you get asked every day. How can you automate that? How can you provide responses faster and not have to answer the phone every time and give the same answer 5 times a day every day? That's the kind of thing that you want to look for. So you want to dig around a little bit and find out what your most frequently asked questions are really and how you're going to provide those out to your customers. So maybe if you have chat as a tool and you want to add some automation to that, you can feed those answers from your knowledge base into the chat tool, create a chat bot that can answer those questions, etc. That's the kind of work that's going to be going on over the next year or 2, and I think it's really important to get on with it and get that get the repetitive, simple stuff off the plates of, especially of level 1. So having gone through that kind of review of the things that are happening, I looked back at a report that we did a couple of years ago with Robert Half Technology, and it was called the Technical Support Center of the Future. And we asked a bunch of people through surveys and interviews what they thought were going to be the top skills that would be needed in the support center. And these still make perfect sense, and maybe more so now. The ability to deal with customers, customer service mindset, making sure that the customer's needs and business outcomes are the priority for you. Being able to look at technology and also see the human interface there. So social intelligence is what we called it in that particular study. Proactive approach. Remember, going back to earlier, I said that reactive is not good enough. It's not fast enough anymore. Thinking about more ways to be proactive. That's a quality that these leaders thought would be really important going forward. And just making sure that you have collaborative abilities within your team, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. We got it right. So here's what you need to start preparing for. As I mentioned, less firefighting, less keeping the lights on, more complex problem solving, more analysis, and more proactive work. Why? Because the simple stuff is gradually going to go away. Now, this has been going on for a long time. You know that we've talked multiple times about shifting left, bringing more complex work down to the front lines, pushing the really simple stuff out into your knowledge base. Now we have something else we can think about, another outlet for it, as I mentioned, things like chatbots, things like automated responses that can help make sure that the work that's actually going to get to the people within the support center involves their problem-solving and troubleshooting skills. It's the more complex stuff. But that also means that the people in the support center need to skill up and make sure that the proper skills are in the proper places. And it's not just technical, strictly speaking. It's things like knowledge capture and sharing. So again, going back to KCS, if you're not familiar with it, maybe you should take a look at it. It provides a way to capture, reuse, and improve knowledge pretty much on the fly so that it's available rapidly, and provides a methodology for all of that to construct your knowledge and to make it available to people so that they can use it in the most efficient way. Complex problem troubleshooting, we just talked about that. Database queries and data visualization. Now those skills would not necessarily have been thought of. Not that I haven't seen support center analysts that have those skills. Yes, I have on many occasions. But it's going to be increasingly important for us to be able to do that stuff. Process and procedure development and documentation. Why is that important going forward? Because somebody's got to feed the bots, all right? If we're going to have a chatbot, for example, we need to be able to tell it what it needs to respond to, how it needs to respond, and make sure that it's accessing the right information and providing the right information, and it needs to be updated. Until AI really becomes powerful and those things like chatbots are able to look into your configuration management system and pull all the vital information out and present it to an end user who may not be technically savvy with the proper information to solve their problem or answer their question, then we need to be able to feed that information into the systems that are providing it out to the customers and users. So having that skill is way important. Network configuration and troubleshooting, why? Because it's all about the network, right? If you're not connected, you can't use cloud systems, you can't communicate in a lot of ways. So network configuration and troubleshooting is increasingly important. Collaboration, again, a big deal. In person and troubleshoot and over electronic methods. Make sure that you understand what collaboration means and how to get your teams collaborating in a healthy way. So teamwork, especially important there, and being able to use those electronic methods to the best of your ability to make sure that that collaboration is happening. Understanding multiple frameworks and methodologies. Why? Because organizations are changing, their outlooks are changing, the business outcomes are becoming increasingly important, and it might be important for you to adopt and adapt different ways of doing things in the future from the way you're doing it now, and there's probably guidance out there for that. Maybe you want to get ISO certified. Maybe you want to look at the new version of ITIL that's going to be out soon. Maybe you want to look at new frameworks and methodologies out there. Maybe your people are looking more at DevOps and Agile and Scrum. So being able to understand a little bit about those frameworks and methodologies is really important. And business relationship management is huge. Being able to advise, gather intelligence, work together with, and make sure that your organization is providing the best business environment with the technology that you have, super important and getting more important all the time. So start now, and the first thing to do is look at what some of those skills going forward are and what they're going to be, and determine what kinds of training you need to have in place to fill the gaps. Right? This is a gap analysis, basically. Prioritize your training needs and establish an ongoing review cycle so that you continue to skill up over time. It's not a one-time thing. Like so many other things, right? We have in ITIL, we have that continuous improvement running around the outside of the ITIL life cycle. It's an ongoing thing. It's not one time. It's not a project. It's ongoing. Continuous improvement, continual improvement, and making sure that things change and are updated properly over time. So an ongoing review cycle for your training is really important. So you make an honest assessment of the current state. And I thought it was important to include the word honest there simply because a lot of times we tend to overestimate what skills we have on the team, or maybe underestimate the skills we have on the team. So take an inventory of what skills your folks actually have, and then look at what the needs are going to be for the future. So if you've got somebody on the team who is really into development and they play around on the side with doing things like maybe developing mobile apps, that kind of thing. They're great at data manipulation. You've got that in the house, and you can build on that team accordingly. Or if you need to develop skills or skills, let's look at an example of that. If we say we need a team member who can configure reports in our ITSM tool, in some tools it's not really easy to do that. It's difficult. Only a small percentage of ITSM tools are basically drag and drop and codeless configuration. Sometimes people need specific coding skills to be able to do things with the ITSM tool, including configure reports. Maybe you need a real data wizard on your team to be able to make those reports work properly and spit out the kind of stats that are helpful to you. So then you can say, okay, we need analysts who understand business goals and language, all right, that business relationship management component. We need to train somebody who can spend 20 of their time working on our tool needs. So if we need to change our ITSM tool or the reports within, we can utilize that person to do it. Or maybe if we're going to really embrace automation in your organization, you need to hire somebody with the skills to manage those bots and who can understand the technical back end of that and make it all work to the benefit of your organization. So doing a really good skills gap analysis is really important in deciding where you need to skill up and get the training done. So just going back over all the territory that we've covered today, business velocity is very high and increasing. Businesses need to go fast. They need to outrun their competition. They need to make sure that products are getting to market rapidly, that customers are getting responses rapidly. And let's stop there for a second and think about this. You as a customer have become accustomed to very simple interfaces. When you do business with Apple or Amazon or Google or any of the big companies, you're used to being able to have a simple thing to do. You press a button, you get an Uber car to pick you up. It's really amazing some of the stuff that's going on, but at the same time, everybody's experiencing that ease of use and that instant responsiveness, and so they come to expect it. This is all part of the consumerization movement, and so your business needs to move ahead as rapidly as the big guys do. And you know that those companies are making changes constantly to improve products, to improve services, and to deliver those things to customers in better ways. So your organization has to think like those guys, because you're competing, whether you like it or not, with the likes of Amazon and Google. We talked about a little bit about support models, and we talked about the increase of intelligent swarming. There's lots of material on intelligent swarming on our website, thinkhdi.com. If you look under Support World or just do a search on intelligent swarming, you'll find multiple articles that talk about how it works and talk about how you might want to get started with it if you're not doing it now, but according to our information anyway, about a third of you are. We talked about frameworks and methodologies and some of the changes there, including the big one, which is the ITIL update that's coming down the road at some point in the not-too-distant future. And then the technology changes, including AI and machine learning and all of those buzzy things that people have been talking about for the last, certainly in 2017. It was, like I said, the topic of 2017. And so that brings us to skills for the future. What do you need to think about for your organization? What's lacking in your organization? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses in terms of the skills that you have on your team to be able to deal with the continuing velocity of change, which is only going to get faster? Okay? So now let's get to some of your questions, and I'm going to open those up here. And this one says, to achieve what you espouse, practitioner level folks, including director level, must be able to convince and justify to senior leadership the crucial necessity of this newer technology. Both groups must be on the same page. Unfortunately, they still, to this day, are not. The key skill set that's missing from HDI-like folks is a true understanding of the language of business. Once this is learned, they will be better able to demonstrate it, how it can improve the business bottom line. That's exactly what I was talking about earlier. To be able to talk business, to be able to make sure that you're on the same page, that business relationship management skill is super important. To be able to manage up, to be able to justify the types of things that you want to do. But also, I'm going to flip this question a little bit around on its head, and I'm going to say that remember that the technology itself is not the end. It's not the goal. You don't want to say, we need to get AI in here. Why is the big question. What is the business purpose of having artificial intelligence? What is the business purpose of having machine learning? Why should we upgrade this particular piece of software to a newer version that has some of these components or will integrate with these components if we don't need it for the goals that we have? That is of paramount importance. So it's always the goal, the non-technology goal, that takes precedence over the technology goal. Technology, as I have said many times elsewhere, is only an enabler. It can only make things go faster or better or cheaper or, you know, pick any two, as the saying goes. It is not a goal to have these technologies in-house. Okay. Next question. Let's say that I've been out of shape in IT skills. Have you a recommended page where I can check some competencies and courses to take online? If you want to take some courses, for sure, go to ThinkHDI and look at our certification and education links. There are lots of courses starting from basically elementary all the way up through director, and also some specific ones centered around things like problem management. And you might want to take a look at that. I would recommend highly that you look at some, if you need technical training, there are lots of courses out there available from free outlets, Coursera, lynda.com. Some of those you got to pay for, some of them are free. There's tons of information about developer skills. There's just a multitude of resources out there for you. And we would say here at HDI, it's more important that you develop the people skills. It's at least equally important, if not more so. When people hire, depending on how their culture is built, they tend to hire for people who have the attitude and the customer service skills and the relationship skills that they're looking for. as opposed to people who have in-depth technical knowledge, unless you're hiring for a very specific position. For example, if you're hiring a Linux administrator, you probably need somebody with really good Linux skills. But generally in service and support and service management, you want to have those relationship skills honed pretty sharply, and I would recommend any of the HDI training to help you do that, depending on what level you're at and what your goal is. Somebody said, well, thanks for helping me say what I really meant. Good. Okay. Glad I could do that. What automation or new challenges do you see for VIP white glove support? Well, first of all, as I mentioned, there's that consumerization challenge is amplified with VIP support, right? Because VIPs are usually used to getting very responsive service, and if they don't get it, they get very unhappy very fast. So there's that type of consumerization outlook is amplified. Automation can help VIPs as well because it might be able to allow you to answer those questions. Maybe there's a button on their desktop that says get support now on a particular thing, and maybe there'll be some things, and this is starting already, they'll be able to have an Alexa-like gizmo on their desk, or you'll have an app running on their laptop that allows them to speak and ask questions and get responses verbally. Remember that that natural language processing is part of the deal with these new updates. That's coming, and some software is going to be coming out this year that has that built in. So you might want to think about that. That affects VIP. Other than that, being able to provide information and answers and solutions rapidly, I don't think anything is particularly applicable to white glove support that we talked about today. It's at least equally and maybe a little bit more applicable to white glove support, again, because the VIP is used to and oftentimes needs to get rapid response, good, accurate answers on a consistent basis when they need it and where they are. So adapt the technology accordingly. This was very informative. How can I get a copy of this presentation? If you're looking at your BrightTalk screen, you should see a tab that says Attachments, and you can open that up. You can download the slides right from there. And there are also some helpful links there to some different things, including our conference. So check that out. You might want to take a look at those. The slide deck is right there. Also, there's a link to our technical support practices and salary report page. And you can, if you're not a member, you can get a preview of that. And if you are a member, you can get hooked up with that report. Thank you. And does it make sense to talk here about the current maturity level in our industry? I think maturity level is a tough thing. Sometimes it has value, sometimes maybe not so much. I think we need to be careful when we talk about maturity. I think that you can adapt and adopt at almost any level that you are. You can jump over some hurdles and get through what you need to get through. So I'm not sure that maturity level plays into it too much, but determine within your organization to meet the goals that you have for yourself and make sure that you're doing the right stuff. And maybe you want to think about getting Support Center certified, or at least using the self-assessment from HDI to help you do that. And we're just about out of time now, so make sure you tune in next month, February 20th, 2018, for our next webinar. This webcast is copyright 2018 by United Business Media. The presentation materials are protected by copyright, if that is the case, by HDI, which is solely responsible for its content. And on behalf of HDI, thank you for your time. Have a great day.